and Hi and welcome to Acorn Knits. My name's Natalia, I'm a knitter based in Sydney, Australia, and this is just my little nook on the internet where I like to talk about all things knitting. And I'm joined today by Kiki, and if you can see there's someone going a little bit chaotic behind the chair, that'll be Appa. But thank you so much for joining me today. I've got quite a bit to catch you up on. So I've got a finished object at last. Yes! And then I've got a few more works in progress, and so if you can hear like banging around, it's not just the cats like going crazy. It's also, we've had a really sudden cold snap in Sydney and it's really, really windy. So I think both children and animals, when it's windy, something happens and like these primal instincts come out and they just go bonkers. And the cats are definitely doing that right now because it is really blowing a gust and all the trees around the apartment are like going crazy. So if you do hear some banging, that's kind of what that is. So anyway, I think with that said, let's get started. So my finished object, I'll give you a hint what it might be. It's obviously my Setesdal sweater, but this is a successful steek, my friends. So I cut away the collar, I cut away the arms, and it all went fine. It was, oh my God, it was such a relief. I was terrified that it was going to absolutely mess up. And in previous episodes, I said, oh, well, what I'll do is I'll knit a swatch and I'll practice before I cut into it because, you know, I want to make sure it's going to be perfect. I've been working on this for months and months. It'd be so silly just to go in guns blazing. And did I do that? No, I didn't. I fished out this old, I think it's a seed stitch sample I did like eons ago. So different wool, different pattern. And I just did some really basic stitches on my machine. And I did 2 layers of them, cut it, and it's been fine. I mean, this is a very rustic wool that was used for it. Like it's barely even unraveling from where I cut it. These haven't even been used at all. But it was a success with this, so I thought, you know what? I'll just try it on the real thing. So, without further ado, here is my finished Setesdal sweater. So here we are. It has been a journey. It's been a journey, and I am so, like, I am relieved to have it done. I'm really proud of myself for having it done, and I love it. It's incredible. It turned out even better than I would have expected, and it's always gonna have this special place in my heart. It's the first project I ever steeked. I mean, really, that's it. It is like the first project I ever steeked. It is probably, I would say, the most involved project I've ever done, just by the sheer scale of it, because it's, you know, it's a menswear jumper, so it is huge. And it was the first time that I did such extensive color work. First time steeking. It was a really, I wouldn't say it was a complex pattern, but it didn't hold your hand whatsoever. So I think now that I've done one of these styles of sweaters, like a more Nordic style, I'm gonna feel really confident going into any other ones going forward. And just like any steeking, it is not scary at all. Like really, these lines, once you've sewn them in, it's effectively like having a lifeline through your knitting. Like they really can't undo past that point. Obviously, I think it would be a little bit scarier if you're using, you know, like a really slippery yarn, like a superwash or something like that, where it's sort of just like very silky and loosey-goosey. Whereas something as rustic as this, as I mentioned, it's not even unraveling from where I've cut it. So the rawagarn that I use, the finnel, is it's also quite rustic, but it is unraveling a bit more. With that said, it's still holding itself pretty well. You know, I'm sure if I pulled at it, it's a different matter. But that's that. I would highly recommend this pattern. It was a real joy to knit. Definitely expect that it's going to take, it's a pretty big undertaking. This is fingering weight yarn on this is fingering weight yarn on 3mm. This is, that's unlucky. It's fingering weight yarn on 3mm needles. So this is not a quick knit by any means whatsoever. I'm pretty sure I started it around February. You know, this is now recorded at the start of June. It's June 1st. So, you know, that's 3-4 months in the making. It's definitely, it took me a long time while I was knitting other things. But I'm so proud of it. I'm so happy. And like I said, when I was showing it to my father, let me just take this off. Actually, no, it's pretty warm. It's like I said, we've had a real cold snap in Sydney. Like I'm wearing a cashmere turtleneck under this with like jeans and thermals underneath it. So you know it's gotten cold in Australia when the Ugg boots have to come out. Actually, that's a lie, because not so much anymore, but definitely in the past, it was a huge fashion trend to be wearing Ugg boots in summer. Like I remember seeing girls in like Ugg boots and then tiny little denim shorts and a bikini top. Like Ugg boots were like a year-long footwear in Sydney. At least, I don't know if it was like that all throughout Australia. I feel like the Gold Coast too. That feels like a very Gold Coast thing, Ugg boots. Anyway, so yes, I'm gonna leave it on because it is very warm and it is bloody freezing out there. So that is my Setesdal sweater complete at last. I'm very, very happy. And yeah, like I said, when I showed it to my dad, I was worried that he would think it was a little bit too, I don't know, I've used a lot of words to describe it, like intricate or just a little bit too fussy for his taste. But he was saying like, oh no, it's so beautiful. Like I love these little dots and stuff. And so it was like, whew, okay, good. I haven't just spent 4 months on something that you will love visually, but actually never practically wear. So I think he actually will probably get quite a bit of wear out of this, especially as we're having a pretty cold winter. I was debating about whether I would do the collar in white or in this blue. So because I did run out of the original yarn that I used, I luckily had some stashed yarn that was sock weight. So it was a slightly different composition, obviously, because it was a sock yarn. It was a blend of wool and nylon. It was actually the Lana Cozy, which I think is a mix of merino wool, alpaca, possum, brushtail possum, and nylon. But luckily, it was a perfect match for this. So I was tossing up whether I do the collar white or navy, and I was speaking to Dad about it and asked him what he would prefer, and he said that he would really like a white collar. It would look really nice and striking, but for practicality reasons, he would prefer navy just because it would mean he'd have to clean it less, because obviously having white up around your face while you're lifting it on and off, it's just going to get a little bit grubbier faster. So the navy's going to obviously hide that more. So I went with the navy in the end. So yes, that is my Setesdal sweater complete. Tick, done. So moving on from that, I will talk about my other work in progress that is very close to being finished. It's in that final slog and it's getting me. So let's chat Moody Fairy. I am doing the slip stitch pattern that forms like an X shape, and I figured it out. Look, these cables actually look how they're meant to look, rather than looking like, what the hell is this? So I worked out why it was that these look so different. In a previous episode, I was saying that I couldn't understand how I so fundamentally misunderstood what the instructions were to create this appearance rather than what it should look like, which is these like crosses. So I'm not going to show you the pattern, but in the pattern, every fourth row you do these cabled rounds, and she has down here C3L and C3R. So I thought that C3L meant cable 3 stitches left, as in like a 3 stitch crossover. So 3 stitches from here, that's 4. So a three cable crossover where you have 6 stitches in total and you're crossing these 3 over. That's what I thought she meant. And that's what I did. And it just created that weird appearance, that sort of lattice, but not a lattice look. And then it came to this one and I thought, well, I know that's not what it's meant to look like. So I finally decided to look in the abbreviations list. like a genius. To which I actually read her definition of what she meant by C3R and C3L, and it wasn't that at all. It was a totally different cable pattern, and once I read that and put it into practice, it came out properly.
Wow.
So it's really satisfying to actually see it knit up the proper way, and it's also a lot less intensive doing this type of cable than it was having to cross 3 over each other like that. I had to use a cable needle to do that because pulling 3 stitches, like if you're crossing it from here, you're taking it the 6th stitch over that way, like it's quite a bit, and it put a lot of tension on the stitches. However, the one that I'm actually doing is only taking from the 3rd stitch, so I actually only have to worry about moving 1 stitch there or 2 stitches behind. So it's a lot easier, and with that I don't have to use a cable needle. I can just do it just with the needles themselves and just kind of slip stitches off and put them back on and rearrange it. So that does speed it up quite a bit. With that said, it's still cabling, it still takes a really long time. I would say an average for me to finish 1 row is maybe an hour. I would say realistically, if not more. There'd be close to 600 stitches on the needles right now, and the cabling is obviously quite slow and tedious to do. So I am struggling a little bit getting the motivation to finish this just because it's so time intensive. I'm trying to think, okay, if I can at least get 1 row done a day, I think I need to have like 30 rows to finish this, and I'm currently at 8. So it's like I can at least handle 1 a day, if not more. So I'm just gonna try and have a deadline, or like have a goal of doing a certain amount of rows per day so I can have it done. But with that said, even though I did mess up the original cabling that I did here, I actually kind of like it because it gives a lot more variety to the shawl. For instance, this slip stitch pattern here is the same as this one lower down, but I think just based off the color choices, it almost looks like a different pattern, because with this, the white and the blue and the pale blue almost kind of mold into each other, and it looks more, I don't know, it's much more subtle, whereas the navy and the beige up here, the pops of navy are really, really strong, where you don't get that in the first rendition of it. So I think that it gives it a nice variety. It looks like each section's different, whereas actually these are both repeats. So I think that's kind of cool. So anyway, that's where I'm at with my Moody Fairy. The end is in sight. It's just going to be a bit of a long haul to get there, but I know I will, and if I just keep doing a little bit every day, it will eventually be finished. So anyway, that's where that's at. So then, talking about swatches that I didn't end up doing for my Setesdal sweater for the steeking, I had also cast on the Stonecrop Cardigan by Andrea Mary without bothering to do a swatch. I was going to, but then I just thought, no, it's fine. And I cast it on, did the ribbing. I had to wait a while for some needles to arrive because I needed a specific size, which was 3.75 for the body. They finally arrived the other week, and I started knitting on it, and I was knitting on it a bit, and I'd done a bit of the short row shaping, and it was just the fabric was looking really loose. And I thought, that doesn't seem right. So I did a kind of basic measurement just to see how many stitches were along a row within 10 centimeters. And it was meant to be, I think, 27, and I had about 22. And I thought, okay, no, that's wrong. That's not right at all. So I unraveled it, started again, and that was when I thought, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna actually knit a swatch this time. So I then knit it on 3 millimeters. Yes, a 3 millimeter swatch, and it came out to this, which is still like a little bit looser than I probably would have wanted. Especially, you can see there, you know, I don't know, it's not exactly the density that I would like. And with the 3 millimeter needles, my gauge still only came to 25 stitches, I believe. And it was unusual because I'm a really tight knitter, so I was surprised that my gauge was so much looser. So then I tried on 2.5, oh, where are you gone? Then I tried on 2.5 mil, and it was a much denser fabric. This is all I had left to do it on. So much denser. And that I believe was 32 stitches, I believe. I think 32 stitches in 10 centimeters. Or less, something like that. Anyway, so then I just went to 2.75 mil, and I've been knitting it with that, and that's created a pretty nice tension for me, I think. So that's what I've been that's what I've been knitting on. Going back to what I was saying before about my tension, I thought it was really odd that it was so off. Generally, my gauge is going to be a little bit tighter than what they suggest in the pattern, or it's going to be spot on. Because I knit continentally and I use metal needles, it also helps compensate for the tightness that I normally have. If I was to knit English style with wooden needles, both those things tend to contribute to a tighter gauge. So anyway, so I'm trying to loosen it up as much as I can. And so it was unusual that it was so much looser than the pattern suggested. So I'm trying to work out why that would be. And then I look at the yarn that I use, which is the Lana Gatto VIP. And I went to the gauge that they provide on the yarn ball. And that was suggesting with, I believe, a 3.5 millimeter needle would give 22 stitches. And so in a 10 centimeter diameter. And so I realized, oh, that's what it is. It's just that there's something about this yarn that gives a much looser gauge. So perhaps just because it's so soft and stretchy, whereas something that's quite rustic may have less give to it. I'm not really sure. But regardless, it just turned out it was the yarn itself that had a much looser gauge. And I felt so silly for not realizing that, because I just looked at it and thought, okay, it's the same weight, it's the same yardage. Like the yardage that I get for the weight is the same as what the pattern suggested, which I believe is Magpie Fibers Domestic Fingering. And I just thought that was it. That's a good enough alternative. And it wasn't. And it was something I've really overlooked. I've been really lucky. In all my other patterns, I've pretty much always substituted yarn compared to what the pattern suggested. And I've never had an issue. Aside from my Belmont, I knit that out of Tuku wool fingering. And that also gave me a much looser gauge, which was really unusual. And I'm sure if I look at it now and compare it to the yarn that the pattern suggested on the gauge that Tuku has, I'm sure it would be a much looser gauge. And that's why it was so much looser. With that one, I had to size down several needles. And same with this. I mean, it was suggested to be 3.75. I've had to go down to 2.75. I mean, that's a whole millimeter difference. That's, you know, like 3 different needle sizes between the two. So it's quite a lot. So anyway, that's all solved. 2.75 is good. I've just started the yoke, doing a bit of the patterning. I'm not doing any of the nups. I'm not a huge fan of the baubles. I feel like when you lay back against a chair in them, it feels like people are like poking you wherever the baubles are. It's kind of like, So I didn't bother doing that. I'm omitting those. And I'm now at the point of the pattern where I'm starting to do the color work, and I've caked up this beautiful ball of Spincycle yarns. It's a bit of a mess because, it's a long story, I just misplaced the clamp for my ball winder, so I had to hold it down, and it was just, it got a bit messy, but so that's why the cake is not beautifully wound, but look at it. Oh, it's so glorious. I can't wait. And I've heard some people saying when they've used Spincycle that as they're knitting, it'll come up to a color section that they're like not so keen on, so they'll just cut it and, you know, find the next section that they do like the color variation of. As I was winding this up, I loved every single section. There is not a piece in here that I don't want to have on the cardigan. So that's also really lovely as well. So anyway, that is about to be joined in to this. I'm very excited to see the color transition go through. It's going to be so glorious. So yes, that's where my Stonecrop cardigan is at. Then the last work in progress that I've got is my honey clutch. And I haven't done a huge amount. I've just finished the bottom there, and I've started to pick up the sides. And with that, I've got the 2 double pointed needles at the end, and then the other ones are on a cable needle there. So just like kind of chipping away at this a little bit. I do want to have some smaller projects on the go that I can take, you know, if I'm on public transport or something like that. While this is a good, smacked in the eye, while this is a really nice small project to carry around, because it's brioche and it has a 4-row repeat, I probably don't want to take it on while I'm on a bus or something, or a train, because if I have to suddenly stop mid-row, I just want to know where I'm at. So whenever I'm knitting on this, I always make sure to complete the 4-row repeat before putting it down, because if I stop, you know, midway through the 3rd row or something, like, I probably would remember it, but I don't want to risk the fact that I may not remember where I'm at. So anyway, that's how that one's coming along. And I think that's pretty much everything. I did actually film myself doing the process of steeking and seaming and everything with this Setesdal sweater. So I'm going to review the footage, and if it is good enough, I'm planning to release it as like a little tutorial. Because as I was saying, when I was going to, like, when I was up that point of the pattern of having to do that, I found it really difficult to find a resource all in one place of how to actually put everything together. So I'm hoping that I might be able to do that with the footage that I filmed. I just got some kind of not ideal camera angles at the start, so hopefully I can compensate for that, and yeah, if it's nice enough, I'll also be posting that soon. So that's everything that I have to catch you up on this week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to speak to you soon. Bye!